I am Dominus Cinephile.
Welcome to my movie and TV series reviews, where I will provide honest opinions of the latest releases. If the movie or TV series is a hit or a miss, be sure to know I will inform you. But if the movie or series is trash, be also sure to know that I will trash the hell out of the movie. I am Dominus Cinephile.
And the movie on the review table today is the Nollywood film Landline. Landline is a gripping 2025 psychological thriller infused with supernatural elements. Written, produced, and directed by Dele Doherty, the film features a powerful cast of Nollywood talents, including Gabriel Afolayan, Zainab Balogun, Bucci Franklin, and Justin Ben. Set in a remote safe house, Landline follows a stranded military sergeant tormented by mysterious phone calls from a disconnected landline. Each eerie call is from an unknown source, offering fragmented clues meant to help him save his pregnant wife from a brutal, relentless killer. But every attempt to guide her ends in failure, forcing him to relive her violent death over and over in a terrifying time loop. As the nightmare intensifies and the loop tightens, the sergeant must unravel the truth behind the calls and devise a way to break the cycle. Time is slipping away, and the true danger isn't just the killer, it's the traitors hiding in plain sight, closer to him than he ever imagined. With his wife's life and their unborn child hanging in the balance, he races against time in a battle of mind, memory, and survival. With such a compelling synopsis, rooted in the psychological time loop genre, let's dive straight into this review to find out if Landline truly delivers on its ambitious premise, or if it stumbles and crashes like many Nollywood attempts before it, especially those that dare to explore time loop narratives, such as the underwhelming Japa movie. Landline premiered on Amazon Prime on April 25th, 2025. I'll be honest, I wasn't anticipating this film. In fact, I hadn't even heard about it until a friend urged me to watch it and demanded I give my take. So, with no expectations and a critical eye, I hit play. The film wastes no time plunging the viewer into psychological disarray. We're introduced to Shalewa, the pregnant protagonist, in a disturbing sequence that feels ripped from a nightmare. She hears a child's voice calling her, and in a trance-like state, she stumbles into the living room, only to be confronted by multiple versions of herself, lying dead in grotesque positions around the room. The tension spikes as the living version of her is gunned down before our eyes, and then she jolts awake. A dream? A warning? A premonition? The film never quite clarifies. This scene sets the tone, eerie, chaotic, and dripping with potential. But then we cut to Kola, her husband, a military sergeant holed up in a safe house. Shalewa calls him, and what follows is a long-winded, painfully bland conversation that contributes nothing meaningful to the story. It attempts to explain why he's not home, but it lacks emotional weight, narrative clarity, or any tension to keep us invested. A missed opportunity in a genre that depends heavily on pacing and purpose. By the time Landline starts to pick up momentum, it abandons clarity and plunges headfirst into a flurry of questions, none of which the film bothers to answer. We're told that Sergeant Kola is in a military safe house due to classified information he holds about a brutal massacre. But from the moment this premise unfolds, the plot begins to unravel under the weight of its own inconsistencies. The most glaring issue? Why is a military sergeant in a secure safe house casually receiving phone calls from his wife and parents on a personal mobile line? This single detail shatters any attempt at believability. In real-world military operations, safe houses are governed by strict protocols, especially when the individual being protected possesses sensitive information. Standard procedure includes strict communication restrictions. Personal phones are usually confiscated or disabled. All calls are routed through secure military channels to prevent location tracking. Communication with civilians is either prohibited or heavily monitored. Why? for three crucial reasons. 1. Safety. A simple phone call can be traced, compromising the safe house. 2. Operational security, OPSEC. Outsiders can unintentionally leak information or expose vulnerabilities. 3. Chain of command. Communication must be controlled and authorized to maintain discipline and protect intelligence. So imagine my disbelief watching a trained military sergeant, supposedly in hiding, chatting with his wife and family like he's on a weekend retreat. That's not just lazy writing. It's a complete breakdown of logic and military realism. It's the first red flag in a film that quickly descends into a spiral of poor decisions and plot holes. This is where the madness begins, and with it, the film's grip on credibility starts to crumble. The time loop in Landline begins when an unplugged landline suddenly rings, and Kola answers it. Sounds intriguing, right? Until you start paying attention to the details. The call comes in at exactly 11:40 p.m., moments after Kola's earlier call to his wife at 11:11 p.m., the precise time her killer pulls the trigger and ends her life. The timing clearly matters, but the film never cares enough to explain why. The caller claims the landline isn't a time machine, but a passage through broken fragments of time. On the surface, this feels like a clever subversion of the genre's typical mechanics. Unlike the death reset loops of Edge of Tomorrow or the problem-solving repetition of Happy Death Day, Landline replaces physical time travel with fractured communication. It's a concept full of potential until the film squanders it. Instead of diving deep into the psychological or emotional impact of such a device, the story lazily drapes itself in vague tension and hollow mystery. It teases philosophical weight but never commits. The supposed brilliance of the time loop device quickly unravels because nothing about it is grounded in logic or even basic narrative effort. The biggest insult? A disconnected landline phone ringing like it's plugged into the supernatural. No explanation, no rules. Just lazy writing. How is the call getting through? Who is the caller? Why is he hell-bent on helping Kola? What's his stake in any of this? The film doesn't care, and worse, it expects the audience not to care either. What could have been a standout entry in the time loop genre turns into an empty, frustrating mess. The writer had the blueprint for something original and haunting, but chose shortcuts and confusion over clarity and craft. The sheer absurdity masquerading as storytelling in this film is nothing short of an insult to viewers' intelligence. What's packaged as a plot is, in reality, a chaotic mess of confusion and illogical twists that defy even the most generous suspension of disbelief. Watching it feels less like engaging with a narrative and more like being force-fed, a stream of poorly conceived scenes that collapse under the weight of their own incoherence. But perhaps the most jarring element is the portrayal of Kola, a sergeant in the Nigerian army, living in an opulent apartment that screams upper-class luxury. The cinematography flaunts this setting with pride, seemingly oblivious to how laughably unrealistic it is. As of 2025, a sergeant earns a basic salary of approximately 63,000 naira per month. Even when you factor in allowances like the 3,000 naira daily ration, cash allowance, and hazard allowance for dangerous deployments, the numbers still don't come close to justifying the kind of lifestyle this character is shown to maintain. What makes it worse is the film's complete failure to justify this glaring inconsistency. There's no explanation, no hint of generational wealth, no indication that Kola or his wife has another source of income. Just a blatant disregard for economic reality. The kind of storytelling shortcut that undermines the film's credibility entirely. This isn't just lazy writing. It's a clear sign of Nollywood's recurring weakness, a refusal to engage in even the most basic research. These inconsistencies aren't minor oversights. They're glaring failures that pull viewers out of the story and expose the hollow shell beneath the surface polish. until filmmakers begin to respect their audience enough to ground their stories in reality, or at the very least, explain their fiction believably. These narrative flaws will continue to drag Nollywood down. Beyond the film's numerous pitfalls in storytelling and its glaring lack of continuity, one redeeming quality, albeit on an average scale, lies in the lead actors' performances, particularly that of Kunle Afolayan. Afolayan's portrayal of Sergeant Kola stands out as the emotional backbone of the film. His performance, for the most part, is convincing and grounded, pulling the audience into the haunting cycle of grief, fear, and psychological trauma that defines his character. There's a subtlety in his delivery, a restraint that breaks away from the overacted, exaggerated style often associated with Nollywood. It's not a perfect performance, but it's certainly well above average, and arguably one of his more refined outings in recent memory. He manages to evoke genuine empathy without resorting to melodrama, a rare feat that elevates the emotional stakes of the film, even when the plot fails to support them. Zainab Balogun, who plays Shalaiwa, Kola's wife, gives a performance that is frustratingly inconsistent. In the quieter moments, especially during her emotional phone conversations with Kola, there's a believable connection between her and Afolayan's character. These scenes show glimpses of chemistry and emotional truth. Unfortunately, that's where the effectiveness ends. The moment the plot demands intensity, fear, or physical expression, particularly in the scenes where she's being hunted by the killer, her performance completely unravels. The climax, where she supposedly fights back, is embarrassingly unconvincing. The fight choreography is poorly executed, lifeless, and devoid of any tension. What should have been a moment of triumph feels more like a parody. Both Balogun and the actor playing the killer fail to bring any urgency or realism to a scene that was clearly meant to be climactic. Which brings us to Bucci Franklin, who plays the so-called killer. His performance is hollow, forgettable, and utterly devoid of menace. There's no intimidation, no psychological edge, no fear factor. Just a bland filler character dumped into the script to check the villain box. For a role that should anchor the tension in the film, he brings neither presence nor purpose. It's a performance that reeks of underdevelopment and lack of direction, reflecting a deeper issue with the film's casting and character design. In a film riddled with narrative flaws and tonal confusion, Kunle Afolayan's performance stands as a lone beacon of authenticity. Unfortunately, he's surrounded by weak co-stars and an even weaker script that fails to match his level of commitment. The result? A film that flirts with greatness in moments, only to crash under the weight of its own mediocrity. Landline gets a lot wrong, but where it truly collapses is in its plot, a flimsy, incoherent mess that grows more absurd the longer it plays out. The backstory, lazily crammed in near the end, feels like an afterthought, a rushed info dump desperately thrown in to give the film some skeletal structure. Kola's presence in a so-called safe house is vaguely linked to a supposed massacre, but the details are murky, underdeveloped, and poorly communicated. What exactly is he being protected from? Why is his information considered dangerous? The film offers no answers, and the motive behind the assassination attempt, laughably weak and insultingly unconvincing. In summary, Landline had the ingredients of a compelling thriller, but as with many Nollywood projects, the potential is squandered by misguided direction and a lack of narrative discipline. The director, who wrote, produced, and helmed the film, seems to have bitten off far more than he could chew. The result is a chaotic blend of half-baked ideas, poor execution, and an embarrassing attempt at a time loop storyline that lacks both logic and emotional payoff. The most glaring issue is the film's ending. The loop is broken, but how? Is it Kola's resilience? Shalewa's sudden defiance? The exposure of his superior's betrayal? The film flirts with all these threads, but commits to none. It leaves the audience not with thought-provoking ambiguity, but with the frustrating sense that even the filmmaker didn't know how to end his own movie. Character development is practically non-existent. No meaningful backstory is provided for any of the key characters, and the film's world building is hollow at best. The killer, a masked intruder with no clear motive, no personality, and no presence, is one of the weakest antagonists to grace the genre. He is less a character and more a prop used to clumsily move the plot forward. The only redeeming element is the lead actor's performance, which manages to anchor the chaos with some level of emotional gravity. But even he is weighed down by a script that gives him little to work with. Worst of all, the director falls into the same trap that has plagued Tyler Perry's weakest efforts, assuming that handling everything, writing, directing, producing, guarantees control. Instead, he Tyler Perried the film into disaster, failing to understand that a good concept without narrative coherence is just cinematic noise. Landline ultimately becomes just another time loop film dumped into Nollywood's growing pile of missed opportunities. And now for my rating. Landline scores a disappointing 3 out of 10. I'm definitely trashing this. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and share this video. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click on the bell icon for notifications. Also, be sure to follow me on TikTok, WhatsApp channel, and Instagram at Domino Cinephile for more movie and TV series reviews. Domino Cinephile, signing out.